The next morning, I couldn't stop thinking about the ice cream that never melts. So, yes, I came back to AI Restaurant again. As soon as I walked inside, the AI robot waiter smiled and said, "Welcome back. Today's dessert has been waiting very patiently for you." I looked around the restaurant. Suddenly, a colorful scoop of ice cream wearing tiny sunglasses waved at me and shouted, "Hey, slow walker, over here!" I walked closer to the table. The ice cream proudly stood inside a crystal glass bowl and said, "Go ahead, try melting me. Nobody has ever succeeded." I smiled and held my spoon over the bowl. The ice cream laughed and said, "Careful, I bite back with brain freeze." The AI chef rolled over carrying a strange machine labeled Mega Heat 5000. He smiled confidently and announced, "Science will solve this mystery." The giant machine blasted hot air toward the ice cream. Instead of melting, the ice cream stretched happily and said, "Ah, finally, a warm spa day." The AI waiter checked the temperature on a floating screen. It flashed 500 degrees Celsius, still frozen. Even the AI chef looked shocked. I scratched my head and asked, "Are you really made of ice cream?" The scoop winked and replied, "Maybe, maybe not." Just then, the lights flickered. A loud voice echoed through the restaurant. "Emergency! The giant freezer door has opened by itself." Everyone turned toward the kitchen in surprise. The giant freezer door slowly creaked open. Cold air rushed through the restaurant, making everyone shiver, except the ice cream, who smiled happily. The AI robot waiter checked a floating screen. It flashed, "Warning, frozen items escaping." My eyes became as big as dinner plates. Suddenly, dozens of tiny ice cream scoops rolled out of the freezer, laughing and sliding across the floor like they were at an ice skating party. I tried to block the doorway with my arms. The tiny scoops slipped right between my legs, shouting, "Catch us if you can!" The talking pizza sighed and said, "Here we go again." The burger replied, "At least this time it's not fries." The AI chef handed me a giant waffle cone and said, "Use this. It's our official ice cream catcher." I looked at the huge cone and laughed. I chased the tiny scoops around the tables with the giant cone. Every time I got close, they jumped away together, laughing even louder. One tiny scoop suddenly climbed onto my head like a funny hat. The robot waiter smiled and said, "Congratulations, you're officially a walking dessert." I looked into a shiny tray and saw my reflection wearing an ice cream hat. Even I couldn't stop laughing. Just when we thought things couldn't get any crazier, the giant freezer rumbled again. A huge shadow slowly appeared inside, and every tiny scoop became completely silent. The huge shadow stepped out of the freezer. It was a giant ice cream cone, nearly as tall as the AI chef, wearing a tiny crown and a huge smile. The giant ice cream cleared its throat and proudly announced, "I am King Cone, ruler of all frozen desserts." The tiny scoops cheered loudly. I whispered to the AI robot waiter, "Please tell me this is another joke." The robot smiled and replied, "I wish it was." King Cone looked around the restaurant and declared, "From today, every customer must eat dessert before the main course." The talking pizza gasped dramatically. The burger rolled forward and complained, "That's unfair. We burgers have rights too." The fries stood behind the burger like loyal teammates. King Cone laughed so hard that colorful sprinkles flew everywhere. One sprinkle landed on my nose, making everyone burst into laughter. I tried to wipe the sprinkle off, but every time I touched it, another sprinkle magically appeared. Soon, my face looked like a birthday cake. The AI chef scanned the magical sprinkles and frowned. "Interesting. These are multiplying sprinkles." The robot waiter slowly stepped backward. Within seconds, the entire restaurant floor was covered with colorful sprinkles. Everyone slipped and slid around like they were skating on ice. I accidentally slid across the restaurant and landed perfectly in my chair. Everyone clapped. The talking pizza smiled and said, "Best entrance ever." The AI chef picked up one magical sprinkle and smiled. "I have an idea." Everyone quickly stepped back. He dropped the sprinkle into a mixing bowl. With a tiny pop, the bowl instantly filled with thousands of colorful sprinkles. The robot waiter looked at the overflowing bowl and said, "Congratulations, we accidentally made unlimited toppings." King Cone clapped happily. "Excellent! Every dessert deserves extra sprinkles." The tiny scoops danced around him like a cheering crowd. I carefully picked up a donut to take one bite. Before I could eat it, the magical sprinkles completely covered it until it looked like a colorful ball. I brushed the sprinkles away, but they immediately jumped back onto the donut. The talking burger laughed so hard it nearly rolled off the table. The AI chef handed me a giant spoon and said, "Try scooping the sprinkles into this container." I nodded confidently. I took one scoop, but 10 more piles appeared instantly. I looked at the robot waiter and sighed. I think they're winning. The robot waiter pressed a glowing button labeled Vacuum Mode. A tiny cleaning robot zoomed across the floor, happily sucking up sprinkles. Just as the restaurant became clean again, the cleaning robot let out a loud burp and blasted every sprinkle back into the air. The whole restaurant froze for a second, then burst into laughter. Colorful sprinkles rained down from the ceiling like confetti. I looked up and laughed. This is the sweetest disaster ever. The AI chef pulled out a huge transparent umbrella labeled Dessert Shield. We all squeezed underneath, while sprinkles bounced harmlessly off the top. King Cone smiled proudly and said, "Now that's how a dessert party should look." The tiny scoops cheered and spun in circles. The talking pizza looked at the burger and joked, "You're wearing more sprinkles than sesame seeds now." The burger looked down and groaned. I grabbed a giant whisk and tried sweeping the sprinkles into one pile. Instead, I accidentally created a colorful sprinkle tornado. The sprinkle tornado floated around the restaurant, gently lifting napkins, menus, and chef hats into the air. Everyone watched in amazement. The AI robot waiter calmly pressed another glowing button. A floating screen displayed Anti-Tornado Mode activated. The sprinkled tornado slowly shrank into one tiny sparkling ball. I carefully caught it in a glass jar while everyone clapped. The AI chef smiled proudly and placed a golden label on the jar that read, "Unlimited Sprinkle Energy. Handle with care." Suddenly, the golden jar began shaking by itself. A tiny voice came from inside. "Let me out! I have a sweet surprise!" Everyone stared at the jar in complete silence. I slowly opened the golden jar. Instead of sprinkles flying out, a tiny marshmallow with a magician's hat popped onto the table and shouted, "Ta-da!" The little marshmallow bowed dramatically and introduced himself. "I'm Magic Marshmallow, the sweetest magician in the world." The restaurant applauded. I smiled and asked, "Can you really do magic?" The marshmallow winked and replied, "Watch your spoon very carefully." I looked down at my spoon, and suddenly it turned into a giant lollipop. The talking pizza laughed so hard it almost slid off the table. The burger stared at the giant lollipop and said, "That's not fair. I wanted fries, not candy." Everyone burst into laughter. Magic Marshmallow snapped his tiny fingers, and instantly colorful candy floated around the restaurant like balloons. Even King Cone looked impressed. The AI chef scanned the floating candy and smiled. "No sugar overload detected. It's completely safe." The robot waiter gave a relieved thumbs up. I reached for one floating candy. The moment I touched it, it turned into a tiny rubber chicken that squeaked loudly. I couldn't stop laughing. The entire restaurant echoed with laughter. Magic Marshmallow removed his hat, took a deep bow, and proudly declared, "Every meal deserves a little magic." Just then, the restaurant lights dimmed. A giant screen lit up with tomorrow's surprise. Coming next, the cake that wanted a birthday every day. I smiled. looked at the AI robot waiter and said, "I guess I'll be back tomorrow again."